Mike Tice played 14 seasons in the NFL, 10 with the Seattle Seahawks. He also coached for another 20 plus, including a head coaching stint with the Minnesota Vikings. And Mike, a lot to get to today. I want to hear some Seahawks stories for sure, but I want to go back to your college playing days at Maryland and the fact that you were a quarterback there for 3 years. I think you went to a couple of bowl games, and you guys had some success there. So what do you remember most about your days at Maryland?
Well, I remember coming out of high school, highly recruited quarterback, and also basketball. My mom wanted me to play basketball. I was a big Knicks fan growing up. Of course, grew up in Long Island, New York. And when I got to Maryland, it was really a shock because I remember my high school. In fact, I spoke to him today, George O'Leary, the UC, Central Florida coach, the Notre Dame thing, and he was my defensive coordinator with the Vikings. But Coach O'Leary drove me down for bowl practice, and they were going to the Cotton Bowl my senior year, and I fell in love with the place because it was only 4.5-hour drive from my front door. I knew my folks could come down for every game. But then when I signed, everything was great till I got there and went into culture shock because our head coach was Jerry Claiborne, a very strict Southern Baptist, no drinking, no swearing, disciplinarian, and I went into shock. It was like, whoa, I wasn't quite ready for this New York guy, big mouth, the whole thing, and it was a great experience because I learned a lot about being a man from Coach Claiborne. Had a severe injury the last play. I was supposed to play in the spring game going into my junior year. I was penciled in as a starter, blew out my shoulder, had to have major shoulder surgery, and thought I'd be redshirted. I ended up starting my junior year. Didn't throw many passes because I actually couldn't throw. My fingers were going numb. I was in tremendous pain. Couldn't understand. My dad couldn't understand why I wasn't redshirted, but and then the next year I recruited Boomer, and Boomer Esiason came in from East Islip. I did start both my junior and senior year. It was just an average quarterback, if that. And
yeah,
then,
but you guys had good teams, Mike. Don't sell yourself short.
We had good players. Maryland was rolling at that time. Coach Claiborne had done a great job of recruiting. Our biggest rival back then, believe it or not, was Penn State. We played Penn State every year that I was there, never beat them. I think it was my senior year, we were actually leading at halftime. That was as close as we got. And then some big, goofy quarterback, 6'7", threw a pick, backed up, and then turned the flow of the game. I can't remember what that guy's name, but I think it sounded like Mike Tice, something like that.
Wait, you threw a pick late with the lead?
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about it, do you?
To change the flow of the game. But we didn't get blown out. We got beat. That was a big moment for us. We were at home. But I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot and really still wanted to play in the NFL. If not, I was going to be a high school teacher and a coach. I always wanted to teach. And I got a great chance. Mr. Thompson called me and wanted me to come out, John Thompson, and try out for the Seahawks as an athlete, not as a quarterback, but they would start me out at quarterback. Back then, we didn't have an off-season program, Paul, and back then you could bring any number of athletes to Cheney training camp. I want to say we brought upwards of 140 players to camp, somewhere around there. It was a lot. I lasted, Paul, maybe 3 days at quarterback, and Jack Patera, I'll never forget, brought me in his office. He said, "Son, would you like to go home, or would you like to move to tight end?" And I said, "I love tight end." So I moved to tight end, and this is a true story. I was the 9th string tight end, and I was number 91. And I'll never forget calling my dad on like a Wednesday. I said, "Hey, Dad, I'll be home Friday." He goes, "You already have a day off?" I said, "No, that's the first cut." He says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Dad, they moved me to tight end, and they gave me number 91. He says, "Well, so what?" I said, "Dad, it's an ineligible number. I can't go out for a pass. So I have no shot here." So anyway, things turned out, God was on our side for once. And And we made the team. I made the team and played there for a long time and loved it.
Well, what do you remember about making the team? Because, like you said, back then I think they had like 12 rounds in the NFL draft. So you go in as a free agent and you make this team. Do you remember, did they call you in? How did it work out?
Well, I remember they were cutting, and Rusty Tillman was the Turk and knocking on the doors. And back then we didn't even have a position coach. They didn't have a tight end coach. So I'd spend half of my time with, God rest his soul, Howard Mudd, who we just lost recently, and the other half with Jerry Rome. And Jerry Rome was the quarterback coach and the coordinator. So I'd split my time between the two. I can't remember how I was told, or was it there was just no knock on my door? I don't think anyone leaked it to me as far as a coach. What was scary for me was back then they only kept 2 tight ends. And there was a guy named Brian Peets, and I said, oh, man, I'm not going to beat this guy out. He's a veteran. And then you had John Country Sawyer. I don't know if you remember old John Country Sawyer. He ended up finishing with the Broncos. Well, they kept John Country Sawyer, and they traded Peets to the 49ers. And I'm like going, wait a second, that leads me. So I kind of had figured out that I had a good shot by then. And I did. I made the team. They changed me to number 86. I got rid of that number 91 and ended up playing and catching 5 little short passes in the opener against the Bengals. 1981. 1981.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think you deserve a lot of credit, because you played 14 seasons. You had 11 touchdown catches in 14 years. Your best season, I think, was 244 yards receiving. You spent basically 14 years as a tight end blocking guys every week for 14 years, knowing that you weren't going to get a whole lot of passes thrown your way. How difficult was that?
Well, people would ask me that. They'd say, well, how do you feel about not catching any balls? And I go, Steve Largent, Ryan Blades, John L. Williams, Kurt Warner, you're going to throw the ball at Mike Tice? So it was kind of an easy equation to figure out. I was down the pecking order. I was the guy that they checked the ball down to late, and I'd catch those 5, 6, 8 yarders and get hit in the back or something, and have welts all over my back from catching a little 5-yard curl route. Check down Charlie. But I just enjoyed my role. I enjoyed my role as being a locker room leader. I enjoyed my role as, kind of being a semi-tough guy and protecting my teammates. And I really had a great career in Seattle, loved every moment of it. Diane and I, of course, retired and moved back to Seattle, and we make our home there. And pretty good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 10 years total, I think, with Seattle, and but at 6'7", how much did you weigh back then?
Coach Knox wanted me thin, so I was about 6'7", 245, no higher than 248, and we had weigh-ins and fines. And later in my career, I went up to 265. I actually finished my career, say the last 5 years, a little heavier. I was the outside tight end, if you want, or the outside tackle, if you want. I just, I wasn't really heavily involved in the passing game, but I was there to block the defensive ends. And when the teams went from a 34 to a 4-3 defense, and you had to block the likes of, Reggie White and the defensive ends, they needed a bigger guy to do it. And I put some weight on later on so I could at least wrestle with those guys before they threw me on the ground.
Yeah, tight end going up against top defensive ends, that's a tall order, but obviously you did it really well. Before we move to Chuck Knox, I want to ask you about, when you talk about blocking guys like Reggie White, who was the most difficult? Would you just step to the line of scrimmage and say, come on, man, you going to make me block this guy?
2 guys come to mind. First off would be Reggie White, and the second guy would be Lawrence Taylor. Just superior athlete, not a guy that was a lot of fun to go against. Had a few bad plays against both those guys. I'll never forget, we were 3rd and 1, and I want to say Sherman Smith was the running back, but I could be wrong. And I made the tackle on 3rd and 1. And the reason I made the tackle is because Reggie White launched me through the air into Sherman Smith. And so I think I'm credited with at least 1 tackle.
I didn't see that in your stat sheet when I was researching you.
I bet you saw a lot of kickoff returns, and that's because I was in the wedge. I was on all the special teams, punt team, kickoff return, even kickoff, and I didn't do a punt return, but my son and I actually were talking about that the other day. And I had a bunch of, I want to say I had 10 or 11, somewhere in that range, kickoff returns. And the only way you have that many kickoff returns is if you're in the wedge for a lot of years. And, those squib kicks at the end of the game and before halftime, man, those were some brutal hits, boy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on the kickoff unit, that's got to be tough. Even for the guy, I think the punt returner is probably the one who's really got to be dialed in and almost has a screw loose because that guy's waiting while guys are bearing down on him. But on kickoff, that's a lot of collisions out there.
Yeah, and that's why they're changing the rules and trying to make it safer because back when early in the 80s, Paul, if you were in a wedge, they could come down and cut you. So you'd be running and there'd be some animal fullback from, say, the Chargers or some crazy guy from the Raiders diving into your knees. I mean, there was no safety. There was no regards to anybody's safety. And it was a suicide job. When they put you on the kickoff return and you're in the wedge, you go like, oh. I know this is a PG show, so I don't want to say what you'd be like, oh. Yeah.
Well, you brought up Knox a couple minutes ago. Like, what was it like playing? Because I know you played for Jack, Patera, and then Chuck. But what do you remember about Chuck?
Well, first off, Chuck was a tremendous players coach. He treated all players like grown men, whether they deserved it or not. And if you didn't act like a grown man, you cut your own throat, but he'd give you the leash. And, he'd allow you to be a grown man and act like a grown man. But I tell you, if you messed it up, you didn't get many second chances with him. He was a great X and O's coach as far as simplistic, but every single person knew what their assignment was. They knew what technique they had to use to execute that assignment. And boy, I tell you, that's some of what's missing in the game today. I think there's too many mental mistakes that you see on the film today. But Chuck was simplistic. Everyone says ground Chuck. He was going to make sure that we didn't make the mistake to get beat. And if the other team, and we just remained patient and stuck to our stuff and knew what we were doing and didn't make mental errors, he knew, and he was right, that other team was going to make that mistake to cost them the game. Now, maybe that's boring football, but he won a lot of games, and we won a lot of games.
Yeah, he certainly did. When you look back at your Seahawks teams, I would imagine that one of those years or one of those seasons was your favorite.
Well, I'd have to say early on, Chuck's first year, and I believe it was 83, right after that 82 strike, when Chuck took over for Mike McCormick, who actually was the interim coach there. And we went to the AFC Championship game in the Coliseum. I mean, that is a season as a young player, third year in the league, that, you'll never forget. And that was probably the most, rewarding season because we had a chance to go to the Super Bowl, which is ultimately the goal. And it's something that in 35 years in the National Football League as a player and a coach, I never achieved.
Yeah, I talked to Dave Krieg about that Raiders championship game and the fact that you would have had to beat them 3 times that season, which is difficult for any team, no matter what. But what do you remember about the AFC Championship game other than kind of just misfiring a little bit?
Well, I remember some turnovers. I'll tell you, I also remember that Frank Hawkins, who I've seen since out of Nevada, same school at Nate Burleson. I drafted Nate Burleson out of Nevada when I was the head coach of the Vikings, O'Day High School product. Knocked me out running down on a kickoff. So to be honest with you, I don't remember a whole hell of a lot about that game. I do remember running down the middle of the field a couple of times as a decoy for a post route for Steve. I was supposed to grab the safety. And I remember the Stork, Hendricks, running down the middle of the field with me maybe once or twice. And about the third time, he yells out to me, "I'm not covering you. They're not throwing you the ball." And he fell off on Largent, and almost made a big play. So I remember being a decoy a little bit in that game, but I don't remember much because I got knocked out.
When did you get hit in that game? Like when you get knocked out, was it early?
Early on, yeah, it was terrible. I played the whole game, because back then the concussion protocol is, where are we playing today? In the LA Coliseum? Yeah, we're in the LA Coliseum. That was your protocol right there.
Man. Wow.
Changed.
So you got clocked in that one, and you bring up Largent, like, we always hear these days that Steve Largent played in a different era, and people scratch their heads at maybe why he got into the Hall of Fame, and what kind of player was he that people are missing out on?
Well, I want to say, and again, I want to make sure that I put out there for the fans to know that I know a little bit about the NFL. I had a 35-year career in the NFL and played with a lot of Hall of Fame wide receivers. I was blessed to play with Art Monk with the Redskins, and of course Chris Carter with the Vikings, and I coached Randy Moss, and Steve Largent was one of the best route runners in the history of the National Football League. He was also one of the best hands catchers, catching the ball with his hands that I'd ever been around. And smart, never made a mental mistake. Also, Steve was a tremendous blocker, and he was unselfish in that regard. He would throw his body around, even to the point I saw a clip the other day where he would get rolled up on. Here comes the pile, and Steve would get rolled up on. But he was trying to finish his block very, very often and was very successful at it. What a great player, what a great team. In fact, Steve played in my golf tournament last week down at Sailor's Cliffs, where we raised a bunch of money for some great charities. And I'm at St. Louis, headed to, we're going to spend a couple of days in Santa Fe, but we're going to have dinner with Steve this Sunday in Tulsa.
I think it's awesome that Steve showed up for that golf tournament. Jim Zorn showed up for that golf tournament. It's been decades, and you guys still remain close.
Well, good people. I look up to those guys. I look up to those guys as two guys of a group of guys. Don Dufek, another one. Sam Atkins, another one. That took me under their wing when I was a young Seahawk and taught me how to be a good pro. And so I hold that in great regard and in great respect and in great admiration for all those guys. Sam McCullum, another one. These were all guys that were veteran guys when I was just a baby coming into league with my head spinning and moving positions and not knowing what the heck I was doing.
When did it slow down for you? Most guys say that rookie season's so fast, but that second year of the game starts to slow down a little bit. When did you feel like you weren't that guy running around with your head spinning around?
Yeah, I would say 4 or 5 years in. Remember, I was behind the 8 ball because I never played with my hand in the ground, not even in Little League. I was always a quarterback and really more of a basketball player. And 4 or 5 years in, the first 2 years were a mess. The third year with Chuck, the second year was a strike, the real bad strike of '82. The third year was Chuck and learning that way. And Chuck did something for me. He traded Pete Metzelaars to Buffalo. And Pete had a great career in Buffalo and another good friend of mine. He brought in Charlie Young, if you remember. Yep. And I'm trying to remember if he got Charlie from the Rams or he was with Chuck with the Rams and then he got him from the 49ers. Anyway, Chuck said to me, "See that guy right there?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "He sits, you sit. He raises his hand to ask a question, you raise your hand to ask a question. He eats this, you eat that." So I was in charge. He was in charge of me. He was in charge of bringing me along, and Charlie did a great job. I'll never forget, we're playing Detroit. Charlie knew, I want to say it was '85, Paul, and I hadn't had a touchdown. And I think it was my first touchdown. And Charlie says, they got a pass called inside the 10 for the tight end. Charlie comes off the field, says, "Get in there, it's your turn." And I said, "What? This is for you." He goes, "Get in there, it's your turn." And I went in and ran the route, caught a touchdown, I think from Dave Krieg. And that was it. Charlie retired after that. So that was the kind of class Charlie Young had.
Yeah, I've had a chance to talk to Charlie on the sidelines over the years, and he was always real personable and I think a real genuine guy.
Absolutely, the Rev.
How about you bring up Dave Krieg, and but before we talk about Krieg, tell me about Largent the day he laid out Atwater.
Well, I remember somebody said, I think it was Edwin Bailey, said in the huddle or on the sideline, I'm going to get him, I'm going to get him. And Steve said, no, I got him. And he got him. He got him. That's called a decleater. I mean, if you can find that clip, that's a decleater. That's one where the guy is vertical, or horizontal, and his feet are off the ground. That's what that hit was. It was one of the best hits ever.
Yeah.
But that's how Steve blocked, too. I mean, he blocked like that.
But it was a payback hit, right? Because Steve had gotten drilled earlier by Atwater.
And a little bit of a cheap shot, too. And I think today it would have been a out of the game shot, one to the head, and they don't allow those hits anymore in the league. But, yeah, Steve got him back, and but that was Steve Largent, tough competitor, great blocker, tremendous hands, one of the best football players, all-around football players I've been around.
I think people don't realize that. I think football fans in general, I think maybe they're starting to see it, but they wonder how some of these good receivers that come in and out of the Seahawks organization, why they don't stick or why they have great preseasons, but by the fourth game, they're cut. And it's like people don't realize that maybe they're not the best route runner. And I think you hit it on the head that route running can win you a job in the NFL because the quarterback knows where you're going to be and can trust you.
Well, especially you're playing teams that play a lot of zone. You got to be smart enough and have the wherewithal enough and the education to know what hole to sit down and be on the same page with the quarterback. And now you play a team that runs a lot of man or press man. Now you got to be able to get off the line of scrimmage, and you got to be able to beat a guy one-on-one just like you do in a 5-on-5 basketball game. So you have to have the ability to do both. And when you find that these tall receivers, they have a hard time getting off a press. You look at these guys now. Metcalf had a great rookie year, and I hear he's having a great preseason and a great training camp. Not preseason, there is no preseason, but training camp. But he's a big, tall guy. And, teams will start pressing guys like that and make them get off the line of scrimmage. And a lot of tall receivers struggle with that press at the line of scrimmage.
So that's something for us to look for coming into this season. As he goes into his second season, it's almost like teams get a little more film on you and they maybe find your tendencies and see how to throw you off your game a little bit.
Well, that's what's so great about the NFL. You have all these trends in college that have come and gone in the NFL, and this guy's going to come in from college and he's going to be this guru. But the defensive coaches in the National Football League are so good at making adjustments, and the great ones, the Belichicks, the great ones, know how to shut down your best player and say, you might beat us, but you're not beating us with Paul Silva. You're going to beat us with somebody else.
Yeah. Hey, take me back to Cheney when training camp with the short shorts and the huge shoulder pads and all the things that came with those days back then. How brutal was that? Because, temperatures had to be upper 90s. You probably had two-a-days where you were practicing nothing like they do today, where they're not, you're hitting each other. Did you ever have times where you had pads twice a day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was the norm. There were no, weightlifting days like the Redskins started back in Joe Gibbs' days when they were the first ones to say, all right, we're going to take this second practice and it's going to be a weightlifting day. That kind of was the change in the National Football League, that Coach Gibbs did that with Dan Riley, the great conditioning coach, if you will, strength coach that came out of Penn State. They were the ones that first did that. Back in my early days, there was no off-season program. You were on your own. We always drove back to New York, Diane and I, and you had to get yourself in shape. And during training camp, you hit every day. I mean, back in those days, you were in full pads during the season on Fridays. You had short yardage and goal line on Fridays in full pads. That's unheard of now. And now they call it Fast Fridays. You're out there maybe an hour and 15 minutes and you're off the field. So times have changed. A lot of that has to do with the players gaining more strength with their union. A lot of it is just common sense, A lot of it is the owners realize that we're paying these players a ton of money and we can't afford to have them hurt. So it's just common sense. But the game has changed really tremendously a lot.
Can you imagine Mike Tice playing in the training camp today? I mean, you might think you were at a country club.
Dude, I retired in 95. I was 36 years old. So I played till I was 36. But if the time, a couple of old guys and I talked about this, if they had the rules like now, I could have made 40. I know I could have made 40. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm blessed to have had such a great career in the National Football League, to be able to be retired and do the things that Diane and I want to do. And I was going to say travel, but we don't travel anymore because of COVID. But we did drive to St. Louis to see my daughter. And
so you drove out there?
Yeah, we drove. We stopped at Mount Rushmore. We stopped in Missoula. We love Missoula, and then we dropped down. We did we did Yellowstone. I'd never been to Yellowstone. Did Old Faithful. We did Rushmore during the day. Neither one of us had done Rushmore during the day, so we did Rushmore during the day. Stopped in Omaha for a steak. So we took our time. We took up almost 5 days, and we're going to be here for 10 days. And then my friend said, you're going to love the ride to St. Louis. You're going to hate to drive back. So now we're thinking about, now we got to drive all the way back.
No, I like that idea though, man. Back in the day when I was much younger, my kids were younger, we would race across the country to Michigan because we didn't want to stop. We just wanted to get to our destination. But we had gone through, I think it was Rapid City, and you have that chance to pull off a highway and go to Mount Rushmore, and you're just like, yeah, let's just keep going. So I think it's good that people take their time and do it. If I do it again, I will do that.
Yeah, you have to. We have a checklist. We've always wanted to go to Santa Fe. Why Santa Fe? I don't know. The food. We said, Chili's and the art and everything. So we're going to spend 2 days on the way back in Santa Fe, of all places. And everything's closed, museums, everything. But I called around a bunch of hotels. The restaurants are open, and that's all we really care about. The restaurants. Yeah.
Well, you guys have now that you bring that up, you had a deli back in the day, didn't you?
Yeah. Diane and her sister she came in from New York, Diane, so we all did. And they opened a deli back in 1984, the year after the playoffs. We had some extra playoff money, which was more money because we played in the championship game than I was making in my salary. And we decided, I was a backup, so I knew reality. I said, how long is my career going to be? So we wanted to open a business. So we opened up the Fill Your Belly Deli in Redmond, before Microsoft was in Redmond. And we ended up closing it, selling it to my sister-in-law in like 92 when I went to the Vikings. And it stayed open a couple more years. But, yeah, we loved it. We enjoyed the players ate in their old time. Steve Largent was teasing about the food, that bring a sandwich from the Fill Your Belly Deli to the golf tournament. And Edwin Bailey said, bring me some chicken salad. So it was good. The players came in. We actually had a couple strike meetings in there during the strike in 87. And I'll never forget, we had the windows papered up and we had some heated moments in there. And outside, trying to get a peek and sneaking through, looking through the thing is John Clayton, trying to see what's going on in the meeting and listening. And yeah, so we had a couple strike meetings there in 87.
So you put paper on the windows to make sure there was double secret, like you guys weren't letting anything out.
We want the cameras from the TV, because that was back, Paul, if you remember, when we voted who's crossing and who's not crossing. Remember that?
Yeah.
Who's crossing the picket line, who's not going to cross. So it got very heated, very, very heated.
I'll have to talk to Clayton about that. That's I talked to him quite a bit, and he's on our show. I'll have to ask him about that one for sure. He probably has some memories of that. When you talk about the early 80s, when you got in, Mike, was that salary enough? Because I had heard guys back in the day where, you got through a football season and you had to have jobs in the off season to keep going. Was that earlier than your career?
No, my rookie year, I made $25,000. Mr. Thompson, when I made the team, I signed for $2,500 as a free agent. $25,000 if I made the team. When I made the team, Mr. Thompson brought me in because he felt so bad that that's all I was making. He gave me a $5,000 raise to $30,000. So my rookie year, I made $30,000. My second year in the league, I made $40,000. And my third year in the league, I started getting rich. I made $60,000. And so I worked in the summers for Beacon's Moving Company. So I
As an
moved
NFL player.
Yeah, I moved office furniture. And my players, late in my career when I was coaching O-line, I would tell them that. I'd say, you guys are spoiled. You're making too much money. You don't earn it. Back when I was your age, I was making and they're like, yeah, right. They didn't believe it, but it is true. That's the kind of money guys like me make. I don't know what Steve Largent those guys were making, but I know I wasn't making that kind
of. No, but I think it's a great reality check for even for players today, but for all of us. We all think, oh, these guys are NFL players. They always made good money. But in that late 70s, early 80s time, guy like you was moving furniture in the off season to make ends meet, correct?
Absolutely. And my wife, Diane, was working as a waitress, and we only had one car. And so she had to walk to work every day in Bellevue. It was called Morgan's Lake Place, in that little lake in Bellevue. I don't even know if the little lake is there anymore. But she worked there for many, many years while I was playing with the Seahawks to earn that extra money to help us out.
Yeah.
Times have changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I love talking to guys like you that played in that era, because I know you got great stories, and I know that there's a lot more to it than just catching passes and blocking guys, and you've enlightened a lot of people today just to kind of give us a little bit of insight. Just a couple more questions for you, Mike. When you look at guys, Dave Krieg always seemed like a character to me, and I've talked to him a couple of times in depth, and when you have guys like that on your team, and maybe ultra competitive guys, pranksters, did anything stand out, like guys that used to always like to pull pranks or things like that, whether it was in training camp or during the season?
Well, I kind of might have been on that list a little bit as a guy that was always trying to get somebody. But Dave Krieg and I were roommates on the road. And I don't know if he'll get mad at me for saying this or not, but he liked to dip. And there were a number of occasions where that dip cup was on the nightstand in between our two beds, and it got knocked over, and it was disgusting. I mean, my God. But, Dave Krieg was a great competitor. He carved himself a fantastic career. I actually, for some reason, looked him up a couple of weeks ago and forgot he was on so many teams. At the end, he kind of boom, 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 and bounced around a little bit. But he had a great career as a Seahawk. He's a great guy. So hopefully next year he'll play in my golf tournament and he won't stiff me again.
Yeah, I think he would. I think that how many years have you been doing that golf tournament?
So that was the first one in Seattle, but I've been doing one for 9 years down in a little town called Minden, Nevada, for the Boys and Girls Club down there, because they're in a middle school. And my friend owns a bunch of businesses in that town, one of my dear friends. And we started, when he opened up his hotel/casino, a little small mom and pop place, 9 years ago, he said, you want to bring your buddies in and have a golf tournament, raise some money for the Boys and Girls Club? I said, sounds like a deal, let's do it. And we had like 40 people from Seattle, Minnesota, New York. We raised like 12 grand. He matched it. We all cried. Our giveaway stuff were like visors and T-shirts from teams. And when we had to cancel it this year, it cost a tremendous amount. It would have been our 10th annual. It cost a tremendous amount of revenue to the Boys and Girls Club, because the last 3 years we made 200,000 plus. That was 200,000. So what we did this year, we wanted to do an event in Seattle, so we copied the formula. It was a 3-day deal. It was going to be country music jam, happy hour with the players and the sponsors, our youth clinic. We always do a youth clinic, give all the kids free shoes, T-shirts, and lunch. We had to cancel all that. I called Steve Largent. I said, are you in if I keep the golf tournament? He says, I'm in. So once Steve said he was in, we decided, my wife Diane and I, to cancel everything but the golf tournament. So we canceled the whole event down in Minden, Nevada. And what we said was, we'll add the Boys and Girls Club from Minden, Nevada to our list of charities. First charity, of course, was the South Puget Sound Boys and Girls Club. Then we added the Carson Valley Boys and Girls Club. And then we have other charities. Operation Warm, my connections with Minneapolis. That's the Minneapolis Fire Department gives out coats to underprivileged children. And then my hometown, my wife and I do a scholarship in my mom and dad's name every year. And so we sponsor them. And we have a couple other small charities like Backpacks for Kids that feed kids lunch on the weekends and bum, bum, bum. So Diane and I just want to make a difference. We've been blessed. We got a 35-year career in the NFL. You know, we're not making 40 grand a year anymore. You know, we're doing okay. We can share with other people that are less fortunate. And during COVID, I think it was a big move that we did this event. And I really appreciate you guys for the coverage because it was a big event and we were able to help a lot of kids out. And it's important to us because you have a great career. Now it's time to give back. Don't be a stuck-up guy that's saying, yeah, I'm resting on my laurels. I got plenty of retirement. I don't need to do anything. Nah, it's time now to step up and spend your leisure time doing something for somebody else.
Well, I think it's great. I mean, you guys raised quite a bit of money in that last golf tournament. Is that something you're going to do then? Are you going to try to keep this up in the Seattle area on an annual basis?
Yeah, what we'll do is next year, we talked it through, we'll do a 2-day event. We'll have something for the kids, some kind of free clinic for the kids, make sure they all get sneakers from Nike and T-shirts and lunch. We'll make sure that's incorporated in there. We'll have our golf event. I already have guys like Nate Burleson, Brian Urlacher, Rob Woodson, Steve Largent, Jim Zone all telling me they're going to come. And we'll do it in Seattle. We'll have a big party the night before in my house in Victor, Washington. And we want to do it. And we'll probably have some kind of event this fall, Paul, at my home, a smaller event. I'm trying to entice, no pun intended, Bobby Flay, a good friend of mine, to come in and cook. And maybe we can raise some more money because the South Puget Sound Boys and Girls Club lost approximately the Bremerton, South Kitsap, and the North Masons Club lost $160,000 in a spring event that they were going to do. And I'm going to try to help make up some of that money in the fall.
Well, if you need some help promoting that, let us know when it's going to happen. If you're going to want to get the word out, and definitely next summer when you have that tournament, I want it to be more than just, hey, Paul, we did this tournament. Can you give us some pub? It's like, no, we want to be there leading up to the tournament so we can help you out and maybe come down there and talk to some guys and make it a much bigger deal or do at least our part. So
we would love it. Yeah, we would love it. And then thanks for jumping in and getting that out there. It was really great that you guys were the first ones out there and took the lead on that. It was a great piece. And yeah, we love it. Diane and I love it. We love to see people smile,
Yeah, well, I think it's great. I hope you guys keep it up. And we're looking forward to coming out and seeing you in person. And when all this passes and you can get that tournament back to the way it should be. And I think it says a lot about your former teammates, the fact that they just said, you know what, if you have it, we're there. And I think that's really cool.
I think it's tremendous. And let me tell you a quick story. And I know you got to go, but Rod Woodson was scheduled to come, and I just assumed that he wasn't going to come. The great Hall of Fame defensive back from the Steelers and the Ravens. And I said, he called me the night before. He said, "What's up? The tournament's tomorrow." I said, "Well, I didn't think you'd want to fly during COVID." He said, "Coach, for you, I'd have come." And I had tears. I had tears in my eye. And that's where because he coached with me with the Raiders, and I was constantly in his office trying to help him be a better coach. And, I was at the tail end of my career, and he was at the beginning of his. And I said to Diana, God bless him. Hopefully I made a difference. And I guess I did for him to say something like that.
Yeah, I think you did clearly on that story. But everything I've read about you, Mike, everybody says that you were, outside of being a great person, you were a tremendous coach and mentor throughout your 20-plus years of coaching. And that follows you, man. That's a real credit to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul, and I appreciate being on with you. And anytime you need me, if you do a post game, you want to talk about the game or anything, you got my number. Just give me a shout.
That would be awesome. Well, I appreciate you making time today, Mike. It's great catching up with you, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Thank you, Paul.